I've been getting a lot of questions lately. Paul, how do I get my collie flow to be super smooth? How do I get that perfect flow between all of these strikes and these transitions and get my collie movements, my techniques, my tactics, my flows to look so good? How do I do that? And in today's training, I want to give you some extra tips to make sure that you are improving your flow, smoothing it out, so that way you're looking good. So there's a whole bunch of elements that come into training to make sure that your flow is developing smoothly, and you're getting these seamless transitions between all these techniques and energies and tactics and all these things. But as far as when we're looking at the flow of the weapon, we want to make sure that we have two basic kind of tips that we're really focusing on to improve our flow. Number one is really focusing on developing the coordination of your striking mechanics. It is absolutely critical. If your striking mechanics are not dialed in, if they're not coordinated, it's just not going to be smooth. It's just not going to look good, you know. And when you're striking, right, you might kind of be like all over the place and striking whatever, or your techniques are kind of falling off lines and falling off arcs. You know, the wrist is kind of breaking where it shouldn't be, and you're getting this like jerking motion in the torso, and then you can't calibrate your strikes with your footwork, and everything feels kind of choppy or feels off balance, or it just doesn't really feel athletic and smooth. So we want to make sure we have really good striking mechanics. So there's a couple of striking mechanic tips that I want to give you today, so that way you're you got some focus points when you're doing your strikes. Okay, number one is making sure that you do not lock out the elbow. Do not extend your elbow all the way out and lock it out on any strikes when it comes to collie. We never lock the elbow out. So every strike that we're doing, the elbow is always bent, even if it's slightly bent, but it never locks out. You don't want this like lock out arm or anything like that. The elbow's got to stay slightly bent, so that way it's mobile, it's flexible, right? We're looking at flexibility in the joints, and at any moment, right, you can suck your hand in if you needed to protect it. So keep your elbow bent at all times. Another striking mechanic tip is make sure that you are pulling your strikes. We have this tendency to want to kind of like push our strikes out there like we're almost like we're throwing a football or a baseball or something like that. But when you're looking at collie and you're looking at how the sword cuts smoothly and cleanly, we really want good pulling motions all the way through these cuts. So we want to pull it, pull it, pull it, pull it. Okay? So the strikes should be initiating out of the lat, not initiating from the pecs, and definitely not initiating from the shoulder or any of the arm muscles or anything like that. It should always be initiating off of the lats. Boom. Right there. So you want these pulling motions with all of your cuts, everything. Boom. Even when you thrust, right, you get that rotation of your hips and shoulders through a pulling energy. Okay? Not just like a loose rotation, but you want to have control of that rotation, and you're doing that through the engagement of the lats. So one of the great exercises to do to strengthen this feel of pulling through your lats is pull-ups. Train your pull-ups. So if you don't like fitness, get over it and train your pull-ups. And that's gonna help activate your lats, and you want that same feel when you are moving around. They're not super tense, you're not trying to tense up your lats like crazy or anything like that, but that's the focus point of the energy, right? It's almost like archery when they talk about back tension, kind of like that in the collie. Okay, the focus in the initiation of your strikes should be focused in the lats, in the back. A third quick tip in your striking mechanics is you want to make sure that you are breaking your wrist over correctly and at the correct positions. A lot of times people start breaking the wrist out a little too early, and they're losing the strike. There's no more strike beyond the point that you end up breaking your wrist. So hold your wrist position. You want to hold that, you know, keep this 90 degree between your wrist, your forearm, and the spine of your weapon. Now my Gnunting obviously is curved forward, so it's not going to look like a perfect 90 degrees, but you want that 90 degrees in the wrist. So hold that 90, right, all the way until your hand is next to your hips and shoulders, and then let that thing break over. There are manipulations where we do break the wrist more closer to the center line, but in the beginning, focus on the basic mechanics. So maintain that position, right? Make sure that you are pulling your cuts all the way through, okay? And hold that wrist position until you're next to your hips and shoulders, and then let the wrist break over and rotate over into that next strike. Okay? Again, if you're kind of breaking your wrist early here, you're losing all the strike after the point that you broke your wrist. So there's no more strike when your wrist is next to your hip. There's just no more strike there anyways. So hold that entire length of that strike until there's just no more strike. Then break the wrist over. This is not just going to enhance the flow and the smoothness of your flow, but it's going to enhance your ability to protect your hand. It's going to enhance the ability to protect your center line, so that way you have more time with the weapon right out in front of you, so it's less time that your opponent can get in on you. Okay? And this is also going to help increase your speed and give you faster return strikes eventually as you're working it and developing that coordination. So just to recap, 3 really quick mechanic tips that I am seeing a lot when I'm observing other people's kali and their flow and stuff is, number 1, make sure that the elbow is bent. I see a lot of people locking their elbow out on their strikes, especially when they get to like the double weapons. They want this like extension of the hand because they want to reach their opponent. But really, we don't want to reach our opponent through the extension of our hand. In kali, the hand is a primary target. So why would you want to extend your hand? Right? If we need to reach our opponent, we do that through the adjustment of footwork and the adjustment of range through the footwork, not through the extension or the reaching of the hand or the weapon. If you have a very well trained opponent in front of you or training partner in front of you, they're probably going to pick it up and they're going to smash your hand. And when your elbow's locked out like that, you don't have the same reflex abilities to get your hand in and protect it in that moment of time. Even if you're ahead and you're trying to hit that, you're trying to get your shot in, if they see the timing and they can pick up the timing for your hand and your arm's locked out, you're not gonna be able to get that back in time or redirect the course of that hand. So if your elbow is bent, you can more easily redirect the course of your hand. So keep the elbow bent, make sure you are pulling the strike through, pull your weapon, whether you're training with a bolo, a training bolo, or you're training with a stick. Get used to pulling it, okay? Pull it, activate the lats. Get the hip and shoulders to rotate through the activation of the lats, okay? Not just swinging the arm, and definitely not pushing the weapon out there, which causes imbalance. And then of course, the final one is make sure that we're breaking the wrist over at the proper places, and don't break your wrist too early and all that. Finish the strike all the way through, and when there's no more strike, when the hand is next to your hip and shoulders, then let that wrist come over. Okay, so this is very important. These 3 mechanical tips are going to help your kali flow and get it smoother and more fluid really, really quickly. Now, the other tip that I want to give you, besides the coordinating of your striking mechanics, there are more striking mechanics that we teach. We have a total of 12 principles in our striking mechanics that we teach here at Kali Center. So if you want all 12, jump on into the inner triangle at some point, and then you can get all 12 of the striking principles that we have, the mechanic principles that we teach. So that's tip number 1, is make sure that your striking mechanics are absolutely coordinated. Tip number 2 is practice slowly. It's probably like, you probably hear this all the time from all these like martial arts experts all the way across the board of all these different styles of martial arts and cultures of martial arts and things. But there's a reason for the redundancy. People just do not slow down, especially like new students. They just don't slow down. I don't know why. They just don't want to listen to that advice. But if you are serious about you want to get your skills up and you want to enhance your flow and enhance your ability, start training slower. So that way your body can make the proper micro adjustments that it needs to make in the coordination. If you're trying to just go fast and hard, especially in the beginning, guys, it's not going to work out for you. You're going to stunt your growth. It's going to take you like 5 to 10 times longer to reach your potential. So slow it down so that way you can really focus on the mechanic that needs to be developed. And then you could apply your maximum effort, not intensity, not speed, effort, to make sure that you are applying absolute maximum effort, meaning I am engaged. My elbow is bent. I'm not making the mistake of locking it out. My elbow is bent. I got 100% effort in keeping that elbow bent. Not speed, not intensity, just effort in keeping the elbow bent. And then what's the next thing I got to make sure I have focus on and effort in? Back engagement, engaging the lats. Focus, 100% focus, 100% effort on making sure that you are using those lats to initiate the strike and the rotation of the torso. And then of course that absolute focus and 100% effort, meaning concentration of holding that wrist position all the way until the strike is truly done and your hand is next to your hip or next to your shoulders, and then breaking that wrist over. This is the importance of slowing down your training. Right? You've probably heard it before. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? So there's a third component to that. We'll get into that at some later on point, but I want you just to focus on slow. Slow, slow, slow. Slow it down. Okay? Speed is not developed. Okay? This is one of the things that I've been saying for a long time. Everyone's like, how do I get faster? How do I get faster? Speed is not developed in training. Speed is earned through proper training. Because you also got to make sure that you're training safely. Because if you ever do pick up a live blade, you got to make sure that you are striking properly so you don't make that mistake of running this thing into yourself and now your training is over. All right, so make sure that you're focusing, just start focusing on those 3 mechanic tips that I just gave you, those striking mechanic principles. Just focus on those 3 and go very slow. And you can take any of the videos that I have up here of any of the different drills and just make sure that you are applying those 3 mechanic tips, those 3 mechanic principles in every single one of those videos. Whether it's single weapon, whether it's double weapon, whatever it is, focus on that and then put tip number 2 in there. Train slowly. Take your time. Be self-disciplined in that. Just slow down the tempo. I don't know how many different ways I can say it and how many different ways that all these like great teachers out there that are giving the same advice. Guys, follow the advice. There's a reason for it. We just want you to get really good. So follow the advice. Then as you're coordinated, you will be able to pick up the speed. You'll be more familiar with the movements. Your body is more in tune and you will naturally, gradually be able to pick up the speed. Do not train at a speed that you cannot control. Do not train at a speed that you cannot visually see and follow with your eyes. If you can't process what's going on, if you can't see the precision or the imprecision of your mechanics, then you're going too fast. You need to slow it down and train at a speed that you can visually see and follow. All right, there you got it. Couple extra tips so that way you can get your Kali flow a lot smoother and a lot more fluid. Okay, and people would be probably pretty surprised at how often I'm actually training very slow, just like this, at these speeds, just to dial it in, you know? I mean, every day I go through a little bit of time where I can dial in my mechanics and my coordination, and I move very slowly like that, very methodically like that. A lot of cognitive focus, pure effort, and be persistent in your training, guys, every single day. Even if it's 10, 15 minutes a day, just to kind of focus on that lesson that you're working on. Maybe it's those 3 mechanics, right? Working on keeping it slow, making it smooth. Okay, that's where you're gonna start finding that transition points from movement to movement, and you'll be able to start smoothing those out. Okay, hopefully this video, these tips, you find very helpful. If you do, hit that thumbs up button, leave me a comment right below, and I'll catch you guys back here for some more training. If there's anything else that you want me to cover, any other questions you want me to answer, go ahead and leave those in the comments below, and I'll make sure I can get to them. All right, until next time, get outside, keep training, slow it down, and get your collie smooth.